Welcome everyone back to Poppy and Oz channel. Hope we're all doing really well. If you're new around here, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe. It does help the channel out. Can't thank you enough for the support. So we've rewatched the game. That's exciting. Carlton versus GWS. Tough loss to follow. I suppose let's get into it. So 116, 104 points, and we warned in the preview, albeit the data was suggesting we should win, that the methodology for the old Giants was to really focus on that stoppage game, to try and get Carlton going back to their one wood, to kind of out-Carlton Carlton. And we talked about their forward half pressure of slowing the ball movement down, being manic, making it hard for Carlton to really get any ascendancy and some clean ball. And they did a fantastic job at that. It's got to be said, GWS were exemplary in them facets of the game. And it's interesting as well that when we talk about these tight ones, the good sides win these tight ones by execution of the basics. To pull it back within 12 points, you can kind of see them ones. You know, Toby Green's goal, if that was spoiled, do you know what I mean? We let Hogan and explicitly get out the back 2 times. Couple of missed tackles inside 50. The Darcy Jones goal late in the first. These little things you can break down and go, okay, cool. GWS played an absolute imperious game plan. But if we took our moments, you could have won. And that really feels it. There was a real vibe going into this game, I felt, from speaking to a lot of people, that, you know, the danger game still exists. And, I mean, you can predict Carlton losing all you want. I mean, you're going to be right, even with the best sides, 4 to 6 times a year. I don't think it was anything like that. I'd never use words like drank your own bathwater or got complacent, because I have far too much respect for what it takes to be an elite professional athlete and to be good at your job. When you're comparing footballers and sportsmen to everyday jobs, if you're working in a call centre or you're a sales manager or something, your bad day is seen by maybe 8 people and it affects no one. When you play in sport, you are literally playing other people who are elite, unlike normal workplace where half your workforce is incompetent, and you are judged on the whole. And this week here, really, if we're going to judge these boys, it's them moments. It's them moments. Looking at the selection, I'm a big fan of having George Hewitt or Kennedy as a sub, and the reason I've been quite consistent with that, the reason that I like it is when we are trying to play this slingshot style, if it does get contested and stoppage heavy, you can always make that change. I don't think always is a great sub if you play Kennedy and Hewitt and you play that more dominant midfield, because then if it gets a little bit congested and the space opening up in behind, you can really do it. And let's go into this game. We talked about what we do, and it was quite interesting. At the start of the game, we really did do what we've seen a lot of this year. The switch of Ollie Hollands to half-back flank, which we've heralded the last 2 weeks because it allows Newman to get up. This week, it really didn't work. The 2 injuries to McGovern and Whittaker, I thought, really curtailed on the rewatch the ability to switch, where we've seen quite a lot Carlton switch their matchups, particularly if a key forward gets early ascendancy. We know Kemp is going to be targeted. You could see McGovern was running around like my nana, and Whittaker was really, really hurt after half-time. His mobility, at times, you could see it off the ball when the contest had happened. He was limping bad. So you could see the way Jesse Hogan was moving free as a bird. And at times, I mean, my wife put a 2-beer policy on me last night to watch England play, and I defended that 2-beer policy like Brodie Kemp, and the beers were Jesse Hogan. They were just streaming down. So, I mean, that happens, and let's look at the numbers. See here around stoppage, no surprise there, the Blues +4. Plus 41.6 for GWS from the pre-game. And this is what we talked about. They had to look at this area, stagnate it, and really curtail Carlton. We know Carlton are always going to be around that 40. The big shift this week was you saw TDK, particularly at stoppages, and a lot of the players overload the defensive side, which we haven't seen, ironically, since the Sydney game. Now, I don't think that that's something that's a structural plan. I think that's a by design in-game, how they respond to the pressure. It's weird that it happened this week, though, because we've seen so long where teams have got ascendancy at the stoppage, and our shift has been a lot more aggressive. You saw it last week where Richmond really did curtail it, and the Blues started to throw Elijah on the ball a little bit more and try and still go with that hard cat's head approach, but have a little bit more slight in there with Walsh and Chera with Elijah. We didn't quite see that this week, so I can't really explain why that is. I felt like their makeup of midfielders would allow that, but I mean, this is credit here to GWS of reading the game. They really did expose Carlton here, and I don't think it's a shift that we're a pure turnover side, because as you can see, the turnover, we still were quite healthy, 51. It's down 18, but it's still quite heavy, and it's more than them. You can see their focus there was that real heavy forward press. And you can see with the defensive half count, and this has been a number that has been going up double figures every week. They limited us to the 6. They were 10 more. And what that really did cause Carlton to do was their heavy forward pressure we talked about in the pre-game. That is their real predominant one would. Caused Carlton to shift a little bit deeper. And we talked about doing the opposite. That a good way to negate this is by getting more ahead of the ball and trying to free up the space in behind you and attack the ball. The Blues, probably because McGovern and Wheat are in, having the slight knocks, didn't have the personnel. But this is where that defensive half really changed for them. There was more space to work in behind from our forward pressure. And Carlton really did react to that heavy forward pressure by sitting back and trying to contain it. Where we've seen against other sides, particularly the last 2 weeks, we actually advance and we get a bit more bolder. It felt a bit safe at times. And ultimately, it was heavily exposed. And this was, I wouldn't say our fears pre-game, because we do give these boys credit that they can adjust to it. Definitely wasn't adjusted. And this is a massive learning from here for me, that when you're playing a top side, you've got to stick to your one wood. You've got to not react to what they do. You impact what they do. And we reacted heavily by sitting with numbers behind the ball. And this really does paint the picture. The forward half generation, because Carlton moved their first layer of defence a little bit more back, the heavy forward pressure from there, a swing plus 14 to GWS, a negative 28.2. And this really shows in the tackles inside 50 count that we see as well. The pressure wasn't there. They tried to sit back. They tried to isolate Charlie, which really helped them out. We talked about it pre-game that Buckley, although he isn't an incredible defender, his ability to stick to his job and not be fooled by the dummy leads, which we mentioned in the pre-game, really did showcase there. And the centre bounce, need I say more? The second half, the Blues really did. You saw TDK almost sitting back and really trying to negate that defensive side as Briggs got ascendancy. 3 goals versus 2 goals and a bit from centre bounce is quite telling. And the Blues here really did lack a little bit of imagination from here. We did really sit on our laurels. And I know you can pull apart team selection. I wasn't a big fan of Matty Cottrell coming back in straight away. I felt like you could have probably had... I mean, I know that I went to Ruckman in this. I'm not saying I'm right because I'll never know. I'm not one of them people, but I did feel like this game here, you needed to protect the source at some stage, because when you're playing these sides that are playing for everything, so it's a very quick method. We used to do this method all the time to teams that used to slingshot out the back half. How many times did we get battered in the turnover and win the stoppage and clearance numbers? It's a very good method. It's a very good method because it does mean that the weaker sides mentally will adjust to it, and we did really buy into that game plan. The pressure acts, for the first time, the Blues were playing chasey, and they showed that they could bring the pressure. The problem is this doesn't equate to tackles. When you're plus 60, if your tackle count doesn't change, you've got a problem. And what they did really well is because they had that overload in the front half, caused Carlton to set back and then become almost too congested in the midfield when we did turn it over. So there was way too more handball chains. What they did is they still kept their width and they went out wide. They did an incredible job. They were still plus 30 on their pressure. The pressure was really good from GWS. They hurried Carlton up. They had that heavy forward pressure, which forced Carlton to kick quickly, and it caused them to kick long down the wing. It caused them to take the options that are easy to them, and that really did affect. And you can see here, like we say, the tackle's been down 6, plus 12. It's not ratio perfect. So that's a big issue there. And then there's tackles inside 50. The forward 50 tackle count was deplorable at times. I mean, you can't make any excuses for that. When you're playing a heavy pressure side, yes, you've got to adjust. I don't know if that was injury-led because, like I say, Whittaker and McGovern their mobility was questionable at best. It was an interesting little facet, this, because the Blues did really sit off them in the back half of the ground. And although the defensive half numbers weren't astronomical from them, did mean that Carlton's inside 50s were a sitting target, particularly when they created stoppage. They wanted to create stoppage all game, and they were very, very proficient around that. The marks inside 50, Ray, as we said, we talked about it at the start of the game, that although their defence isn't sexy, it's very resilient, and they didn't buy the Charlie Curnow dummy lead. And it was very interesting that they kind of had the mentality I had pre-game against Geelong. Let one of them kick 5 goals. It won't really affect you in the long term. And Buckley's job on Curnow was incredible, to be fair. He really made it hard. Charlie did get the better of him for a quarter, but there it is. There it is, isn't it? I mean, goals per inside 50, the Blues generated, but this was the big area. Their midfield and forward pressure was down, so we saw that the defence was exposed. Nearly a 10% swing for goals is big, and a 10% swing down from scores per inside 50. That is equating from Carlton's lack of forward half pressure. That means that they're not getting them repeat entries. That means they're not getting them repeat little scrub kicks at goal. They were looking for perfect because they were so deep. They were having to kick long, and they weren't true inside 50s. We saw a lot of shallow entries this week from the Blues, which we haven't seen in the last couple of weeks. And again, this is a lesson to learn here. You've got to expose what you're good at. You've got to do that. The rebound 50 rate as well, look, incredible. When you have a 10-point swing, 10% swing, when you are a very big turnover defensive half side, credit to them. This is not something that was a big focus on them because they played so advanced and they started to play more advanced. So that's why they had their depreciation. And the intercept marks, as we said, this is an area here that the Blues just played deep, so they were becoming contested. There wasn't really a chance to play off your man. Jesse Hogan staying so deep was incredible at times. And there you can see Carlton swing in the one-on-ones. Not as many one-on-ones as we see, but the ones that we did do did damage us, versus they got 8% better because of Carlton's shots to nothing. And all in all, it was a real tough game for the Blues. The Blues showed a little bit of heart in the end, and that does say to me that they'll be all right. But it did remind me heavily of the final we played against Brisbane. The one highlight for me is the Blues showed something and got themselves back into it. But the big thing here is when you've got a big lead and the team really goes, they really press the congestion button. It took us 2 quarters to realise what it was doing. It felt like that. And in game, it really did look bad. It looked real one-sided for 2 quarters. And when you go that long without kicking a goal, you just saw the pressure. The Blues just weren't willing to be a bit bolder. And maybe there's still a bit of frailty in them. There probably is. It's tough, though, because they were incredible with their pressure. And we talk about pressure wins football games. It was true pressure. It really made it hard. And that's something that the Blues will look at this game. There's a lot of learnings for me. I think the conversation of 2 rucks still presents itself because I think it's the most quickest way to even up stoppage and clearance. I've always been a big fan of George Hewitt. I call him the Rodri of that, and he allows Cripper to do what he does. There's definitely some little workings there now. Players are coming back. It was an interesting one because Ollie didn't play particularly well, but Matt Cottrell will be better for the run, but he didn't look quite fit enough. So it's going to be a real interesting selection in the next couple of weeks because it's definitely not the finished article. And I don't think it's worth getting upset about, to be honest. My energies are low at the moment, and I apologise for that again. It's not like me. I'll get my energies back, and I'm sure the Blues will. Now it's focusing heavily on the Western Bulldogs, a must-win fixture for the Blues. They want to get back onto the winners' podium. These things happen, though, in sport. Sometimes the opposition is good, and sometimes you're not as good as you hoped you were, and that's the nature of the beast. We move, we go on, and I always think of Edgar A. Guest in these things. His famous poem, I don't know if you know it, Equipment, but you know, the one that goes, figure it out yourself, my lad. You've got all the greatest of men have had. 2 arms, 2 hands, 2 legs, 2 eyes, and a brain to use. It would be wise. With this equipment, they all began. So start for the top and say, I can. And that's it. The Blues have got to remember what they are. What they are. That they are a fearsome magnet of a football side. So, bad loss. They'll move. They'll learn from it. Peace, love, and light. Pom out.
I see her rolling up, Uber black Cadillac, high heel boots and a sexy body full of tats. Baby's bad.